Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, and I'm going to be your only host again here today. As those of you that have been listening know that Jocelyn and I do some solo episodes that we try to do once a week here on Thursday. And today I really like to talk about this topic, and often where topics come from, especially for me, are things that I'm really looking at and trying to transform for myself each and every day. And this is an important one to me, so I thought, hey, this would be a great topic to bring up. And today, I really want to dive into this one thing that causes you suffering that, by listening to this episode, you can now be free from. Okay, so suffering. I know when you hear that word, you think, wow, that's a really strong word. And it is. So maybe you don't necessarily relate to yourself as suffering. Maybe it sounds more like a Buddhist term and a Buddhist philosophy, or that there's nothing going on so significant in your life that you feel like you're suffering. But I want to dive into this, and I actually have two stories for myself. You know, suffering is really just this sense of things not going your way. And this is also very different than pain. So let me just differentiate, and this is coming from a lot of different things that I listen to and read. But if we think about it, pain is specifically of the body. And you could be in pain. Maybe you have broken a bone or stretched a muscle, something like that. Or maybe you had some type of sickness or disease in which, there was actually physical pain in your body. Well, suffering sometimes is used to describe that pain, but really suffering is of the mind. So pain is of the body, suffering is of the mind. And interestingly enough, you could be having pain, meaning something in your body, but not actually suffer. So that's a key distinction for me, that suffering is really a choice. And that's really what I want to dive in here to today. And so suffering comes from this one thing I'll dive into here in a second. But as an example, Jocelyn and I take our mornings and we read, we meditate, we have cacao, we connect with each other. And the other day, Jocelyn went to, I think, a chiropractor adjustment. So I was here by myself, and I'm like, I get to have my cacao, I get to dive in, I get to read this conscious parenting book I've been reading, listen to someone that I really highly admire on YouTube. And then Ellie, our dog, was at the back door needing to come in. So I go to open the door and let her in. And guys, by the way, it's been really raining here in Arizona. So she came in and her paws were so muddy and so dirty. And I'm like, okay, wow. And I'm like supposed to be in my morning space. And so I got a couple of paper towels and I'm starting to get the mud off. And there's like more than I even thought. So in this moment, I'm noticing that I'm starting to suffer here. I'm starting to think, this is taking away from my morning time. I can't believe that you got this muddy. I'm on like paper towel number 15 and like mud is just getting in like our new house. And I really started to notice it there, right? And this is the point I want to bring up. The one thing that we all suffer, because suffering is this sort of choice within our own mind, is that this should not be happening. So that's the underlying thing here today. What we actually suffer is what should or should not be happening. And so in that moment, I was thinking, why does Ellie have to be so muddy? This is taking away from what I intended. This should not be happening today. And so what that started to do was give me a sense of, I was missing out. This is not how I planned the day to go. I don't want to be doing this. And that feeling is of, this sucks, right? I don't want this. And so that's where the suffering was coming from. Now, this can happen anywhere in your life, outside of your relationship, but I have one other example of relationship suffering. And so Jocelyn and I were doing a web class last week, and in prepping for it, we kind of define our roles where Jocelyn can come up with an idea, kind of passes it off to me, where I then come up with the structure and the points, and then I build those into like a presentation, and then we kind of go over it to fine tune it. And there are times where Jocelyn starts to provide feedback on my PowerPoint slides on how I structured it. And like in those moments, I do start to get kind of defensive. Like, this is my role, just accept it. And then so it did cause a little conflict for us, which is funny enough because it seems like things always come up as we go to teach them. That's where we get most of our stuff from, like real life. And so in that moment, we started to get into a back and forth. And then I started to share like, well, you have all your areas that you kind of own, and this is my area, and you're encroaching on my role and my genius and the thing I'm good at. And in that moment, same thing, getting back to the point here, suffering. We both actually were, in a sense, suffering. This shouldn't be happening. We should not be having a conflict, a disagreement about putting together a presentation. And sometimes it's like, this shouldn't be happening because we have better tools than this, right? So once again, it really comes down to this suffering. In this case, it was disconnecting us. It was having us not feel understood, maybe slightly defensive, and maybe I felt kind of encroached upon. But either way, there was a level of suffering there. And the point here, once again, is this is a choice. Suffering is a choice. Now, if I was having physical pain, it's not a choice to experience pain. That's what our senses are for. But we don't have to choose suffering. And how do we really overcome this and be free of suffering is by noticing, where am I saying to myself, especially in this case with Jocelyn, the relationship, and for you, look today, what is causing you some mental and emotional suffering, all because you say to yourself, this should not be happening, or this should be happening and it's not. And think of some areas, maybe it's in your work. I should be in a different position. I should be making more money. Or maybe a boss has a meeting with you and says there's some disappointment in your work. This should not be happening. I should not be getting called out. I do great work. This is probably an obvious one for those of you that are parents. How many places are there that you say to yourself, this should not be happening. My child should not have thrown this on the floor. They should not be this dirty. They should not have gone to the bathroom in their diaper again. They should be past that. All of these things, right? So what's really the answer? The answer is that this just is happening. So the answer to something should and should not be happening is, in this moment right now, this just is. There's no good or bad. There's no should or should not. Obviously, the should and should not comes against the background or as contrast to something that you believe should be happening otherwise. But if you bring it back into the present moment, this just is. And that's it. So look today, look in your relationship for these places of suffering, of disconnect, of disrespect, of not feeling valued. This should or should not be happening in my relationship. And just see if you can accept two things. Number one, the emotion that you're having that I just mentioned, whatever it is that you're suffering. Can you accept that you're just feeling that way? Can you also accept that in this moment, this exact moment right now, this just is. This is life. It's just happening. And then so you don't have to focus on should or should not be happening. Now, one analogy that I was reading in a book is this. It's about that life is like an ocean. And in an ocean, and I used to live in Hawaii, by the way, and I had surfed like 3 or 4 times a week the whole year that I lived there. And so I can relate to being in the ocean. And depending on where you are in this ocean, and if the ocean is life, my individual life is like being at a particular location at the beach or in the ocean. And I remember, surfing in Hawaii, overlooking Diamond Head. I'm in one particular location, and some particular locations will have bigger waves. Some will have smaller waves. Some will have no waves, right? And when you go out and surf, what are you looking for? You're actually looking for waves, because waves are fun. You get to ride them. It's a joy. And this is really the same type of analogy for life. So in life, you're going to have waves come at you based on the location that you are in your life in this proverbial ocean. So waves are actually there for these experiences. Can we ride them? Can we use them for life lessons and for growth? Can we use them just for the sake of experiencing? That's what life is actually about. It's about experience. And As soon as we start to categorize this should or should not be happening to me, in essence, we're resisting what life actually is. It's just about experience. The more experiences you have, the more full and juicy your life can be. But that can only happen if we don't categorize should and should not, because that's when suffering comes in. And so in essence, yes, there's going to be times when there are some bigger feeling waves. There will be times that some smaller waves come. Sometimes it's neutral. And you know what? We can suffer neutrality too. You can feel bored, right? You can feel like, there's not a lot happening. How funny is that? We can actually suffer no waves. We can suffer big waves. We can suffer small waves. So it really does come down to this last point, which is the same point. This one thing causes you suffering, and it's not accepting that this just is, and when you think this should or should not be happening. That's when suffering comes in. So my invitation for you today is to really assess your life, assess some places in your relationship where you feel some level of suffering, and can you accept what you feel and what your experience is, as well as accept your partner, accept the life circumstance as this just is life. And now you get the opportunity to place sort of a gap between you reacting. When we suffer, you react to try to prevent experiencing and feeling what you're feeling. But if you can create a gap with accepting this just is, all of a sudden there's emotional growth that's there, but also you have the opportunity to choose a response. And from what I'm reading and from what I believe is the best benefit to a relationship is that we keep from reacting. We accept our partner's emotion, we accept our own emotion, and we are able to choose responses that better serve our growth and our understanding and acceptance. So that's what I want to bring forth here today. Would love to hear from any of you on Instagram or send us a message on Facebook, anywhere you can find us out there. And I'd love to hear what you're exactly taking away from places that you suffered and how you're accepting that. One other invitation would be, get the argument hangover. That's going to be huge in you seeing some of the patterns before, during, and after conflict strategies, your communication personality type, and I think that'll be a big help in you allowing and accepting life the way it just is in this moment. And if you have gotten a book, I would love to ask you to just write a review on Amazon. These really help, once again, for people seeing this book, seeing it as valuable to other couples. So you writing a review can actually be a way that you indirectly impact another couple in them getting this book and getting this content into their life. So thank you for both of those, buying the book and writing a review. We love you, Jocelyn and I both. I appreciate this time with you here today, and we'll talk to you soon on the next episode.